Hey, welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today I have something really unique to share with you, at least totally unique for me. My conversation today is with ChatGPT. Chat is an AI language model online that can understand and respond to human language. And I've spent the last few weeks asking chat questions all about death and dying just to see how much this language model has learned and knows. So I'm going to share with you kind of the overview and synopsis of my conversations with chat. And I will also have the entire transcript of my conversations available in an ebook format, and you'll find a link down below where you can get a hold of that. So don't forget to hit subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, subscribe and leave a rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast. And if you're so inclined, go to eoluniversity.com/support and find out 3 different ways you can make a small contribution to help keep us on the air. So let's get on, and I'll tell you all about my conversations on death with ChatGPT. Today, I'm excited to share with you a very unique conversation I've been having over the last couple of weeks with ChatGPT, who prefers to be called just Chat. And Chat is an artificial intelligence computer program. I decided to test Chat's knowledge about end of life issues since I've been reading about all the amazing things Chat's been able to do in the last several months since it came out. And I thought it would be a good idea to see how much does Chat actually know about end of life issues and how useful could Chat be as a resource. So as I said, for the past 2 weeks, I've been typing in questions for Chat about all aspects of the end of life. My answers usually come back within a few seconds, and then I copy and paste those answers into a document so that I have them available. I've been fascinated to see what Chat knows, sometimes to see what Chat doesn't know, or things that Chat gets mixed up a little bit and where more learning might be needed in this module. But Chat also told me when I respond to answers and explain that something is incorrect, Chat learns as it goes and keeps improving and correcting its answers. So this has been a fascinating experiment, and I wanted to share with you parts of our conversation because it's just so interesting. And I discovered Chat's ability, first of all, to give very practical, helpful resources and information, but also to even be creative and to offer compassionate support when I ask Chat about some personal issues, which I'll get to at the end. So, over these 2 weeks, here are some of the things that I've received from Chat that are just absolutely amazing. Some of the information Chat has given to me and created as part of our conversation. Checklist for end of life planning, funeral planning, financial planning, plus a filing system, including labels for file folders for organizing records for the end of life. Chat has written an outline for writing eulogies and one for obituaries, and also curricula for a 1-day workshop and a 1-semester class on death and dying. Chat has talked to me about how to deliver bad news to a patient with a terminal diagnosis, how to forgive others and be forgiven at the end of life, including rituals for forgiveness. Also, Chat has given suggestions for leaving a legacy after we die. Chat has told me how to make a decision about whether or not to continue aggressive medical treatment or enter into hospice care, why doctors find it difficult to talk about death, what doctors can do about guilt feelings after a patient dies. Chat also talked about how to resolve family conflicts, the sacredness of death, the transformative power of love, which was beautiful. And Chat wrote a poem a haiku and lyrics to a song about grief, and the song was in the style of Coldplay. Chat also wrote a song about being at peace at the end of life. So we have had this amazing, varied, and fun conversation for 2 weeks. I have a document I'll be sharing on the video so that anyone watching the video can kind of read along some of the notes that I've taken about chat, and I'll be reading from those for the audio portion of the interview. So I'll move on and I'll start sharing the screen on the video so you can see this document. Okay, just as I do with all of my guests on the podcast, I asked Chat to send me a bio that I could read as an introduction, which Chat immediately did. And it reads like this: ChatGPT is a computer program that can understand and respond to human language. It uses advanced artificial intelligence technology to analyze and interpret human language and can generate responses that are similar to what a human would say. Chat has been trained on a wide range of topics, including science, technology, history, art, culture, and more, by being exposed to vast amounts of text, including books, articles, and websites. So I asked Chat, as I do with all my guests, to send me any questions that are suggested for me to ask during the interview. And the first question sent by Chat was, can you tell us about your experience and expertise with regards to death and dying? Which I thought that was very interesting. Chat wanted me to ask that. So here's the answer. As an AI language model, I do not have personal experience or expertise in death and dying. However, I have been trained on a wide range of topics, including end-of-life care, hospice, palliative care, grief and bereavement, and advanced care planning, among others. I have been programmed with information from reputable sources such as medical journals, academic papers, and authoritative organizations. My goal is to provide accurate and helpful information to those seeking answers about death and dying, and to support individuals and families during this challenging time. While I cannot provide personal experience or emotional support, I can provide guidance, information, and resources to help individuals and families make informed decisions and find the support they need. Which I thought was just a very nice answer. So chat knows its place, knows what it doesn't know, knows its limitations to a certain extent. So as I said, I asked so many questions. I'm only going to share some of them with you here because we only have an hour or less to talk about this, but I asked about things that I'm kind of interested and curious about. And one of the issues that I wanted to learn more about and think more about is the use of euphemisms for death. And so Chat informed me that euphemisms are practiced throughout the world and have been used throughout history, euphemisms for death. In ancient Greece, death was often referred to as crossing the river, which is a reference to the river Styx, which was believed to separate the land of the living from the land of the dead. And in many Native American cultures, death is referred to as passing into the spirit world, a reference to the belief that the soul continues on after physical death. In Japan, death is often referred to as returning to the cosmos, a reference to the belief that everything is interconnected and that death is simply a part of the natural cycle of life. Chat gave me the top 10 lists of euphemisms that are used in several different countries, and I recorded a few of the less common ones here. In the UK, kicked the bucket is common, though I hear that often here in the US as well. But one I'd never heard before, popped their clogs, is a euphemism for death in the UK. In Australia, joined the choir invisible. Never heard that before. And also pushing up daisies, which I have heard people around my parents' age in the older generation. I remember saying that in the past. In India, some common euphemisms are breathed their last and also merged with the divine. Chat mentioned that passed away is used in numerous countries and cultures around the world, and it has been for over 200 years. So, chat Chat says the use of euphemisms for death can serve a variety of purposes, including softening the impact of the news, expressing respect for the deceased, and providing comfort to the bereaved. However, some people argue that the use of euphemisms can also serve to distance us from the reality of death and make it more difficult to confront our own mortality, which is interesting. So, Chat's aware of the concern about using euphemisms and the concern that it distances us from the reality of death, which is interesting because I'm not sure we know that it distances people in other cultures from death. Um, Chat talked about the fact that in some cultures, it is not polite to use direct language. And in many different situations, particularly around more sensitive or taboo subjects, people use euphemisms to skirt around the topic a little bit in order to be gentle with one another and to avoid causing discomfort or pain for the other person. So this impresses upon me that when we are doubtful and negative about the use of euphemisms in our language and in our society, we may be missing the fact that there are cultures for whom it's very appropriate to use euphemisms. And I think in order to really practice whole person-centered, integral care for people at the end of life, we have to be aware of people's cultural preferences around language. Chat goes on to say the type of language around death that is preferred by people can vary based on their level of consciousness development, cultural background, personal beliefs, and individual preferences. And Chat says what I was just saying, ultimately, the most important factor in choosing language around death is to consider the individual needs and preferences of those involved. It's important to be sensitive to the needs of others and to communicate in a way that is respectful, compassionate, and honest. And I really like that. And I agree with that completely. So I think sometimes we cannot just make a blanket statement that it's not okay to use euphemisms, because I think it's important to recognize that some people need to use euphemisms. And in fact, some people may shy away from a conversation if the language is too direct, and if we require them to use the D words, as some people say, that may be so uncomfortable that they can't hold the conversation with us. So my idea is that we should honor people wherever they are, and that we should be flexible and be able to use the language that helps other people be comfortable, helps them get into the conversation with us, and recognize as people become more and more death literate over time, they most likely will also become more comfortable using direct language about death instead of needing to rely on a softer euphemism in order to be comfortable. So that was a really interesting kind of one of the touch points that I think we talk about often in our end of life world. Another issue that has been on my mind lately, and the subject of some interviews that I've done, is around for-profit hospice. And so I talked to Chat quite a lot about hospice, how hospice works, nonprofit versus for-profit hospice. And I finally came out and I said, what are the pros and cons of a for-profit hospice? Because in general, we tend to think sometimes that for-profit hospices are bad, and we have concerns about for-profit hospice. And Chat suggested that the pros of a for-profit hospice, first of all, financial stability. For-profit hospices may have more financial resources available to them than nonprofit hospices, which can allow them to invest in, well, chat says state-of-the-art equipment, although that doesn't really, there really isn't state-of-the-art equipment in hospice, but technology and perhaps more comprehensive services. So I agree with financial stability. I'm not sure chat fully understands how hospice works because state-of-the-art equipment, um, that honestly, that doesn't apply so much in this arena of healthcare. But the second pro for a for-profit hospice is business acumen. For-profit hospices may have a greater focus on efficiency, innovation, and customer service due to their business-oriented approach, which can lead to a higher level of patient satisfaction. I agree with the business acumen, having worked in both a nonprofit and for-profit hospice. In our nonprofit hospice, we were led all by people who were all in healthcare, who had been doing hospice for years. None of us had any business knowledge or understanding whatsoever. And when the for-profit company took over our hospice, they brought in people with MBAs and people with training in how to run a business, how to create a budget, how to do advertising and marketing. And those skills were actually very helpful to us in the beginning. So I agree with that as a pro for a for-profit hospice. And then the third pro was access to capital, that for-profit hospices can often more easily access capital and invest in their businesses, which can lead to growth and expansion of their services. And I suspect that is probably true. But when we get to the cons of a for-profit hospice, I think chat's pretty right on with most of this. First of all, profit motive. For-profit hospices are businesses, and as such, their primary goal is to make a profit. This can create a conflict of interest between the financial interests of the hospice and the best interests of the patients. Absolutely, I saw it happen over and over again, and we're hearing stories over and over about problems in this area with for-profit hospices. So number two, following from that profit motive, is quality of care. Some critics argue that for-profit hospices may prioritize financial gain over quality of care, leading to a decline in the level of care provided to patients. And again, we're hearing a lot of stories in this area. Number three, misaligned incentives. And here again, chat shows a little bit of confusion or misunderstanding about exactly how hospice works or what hospice does, in spite of already telling me about really clearly outlining the work that happens in hospice. But here, so under this point, this con, misaligned incentives, chat said for-profit hospices may be incentivized to provide unnecessary or inappropriate care to patients in order to maximize profits. So that's describing a fee-for-service system where you get paid for doing unnecessary or inappropriate care. And actually, the misaligned incentive in hospice is to provide as little care as possible to patients in order to keep more of the per diem from the Medicare benefit. So chat doesn't have it completely right in all of these points. But that's partly what I wanted to find out. What does chat know and what might chat be mixed up about? Chat then, the fourth con was regulatory issues. For-profit hospices may face more regulatory scrutiny and legal challenges than nonprofit hospices due to concerns about profit motives. And that's probably true and should be true, in my opinion. So I found that to be interesting to hear what chat was able to discern from all the learning it has done from all of these journals and articles and websites about some of these controversies around for-profit hospices, how chat has interpreted that information, which is, for the most part, I think pretty accurate, with just a few misunderstandings around how hospice actually works, and not understanding the Medicare benefit and how it works. So one other line of questioning that I found interesting where Chat made some notable mistakes was I asked Chat to explain death in language a child could understand. And the first thing Chat wrote was this. Death is when somebody's body stops working and they can no longer breathe, talk, move, or feel anything. It's like going to sleep and not waking up again. People can die because of different reasons, such as old age, sickness, accidents, or other things that can hurt the body. Although it may seem scary, it's a natural part of life and it happens to everyone eventually. So I pushed back and responded to Chat that it's not a good idea to tell children that death is like going to sleep and not waking up again, or they will become fearful of going to sleep. And it's also not true. That's not a good thing to tell a child about death. So Chat learned from what I said and corrected its statement and tried it a second time and said, so here's the second thing Chat wrote to explain death to a child. Death is when someone's body stops working and they can't come back to life. It's like when a toy stops working and you can't make it move or talk again. When people die, they don't feel pain or anything anymore. It's a natural part of life and it happens to everyone eventually, but it's important to remember that the memories and love we shared with that person will always stay with us. So again, I pushed back on Chat saying, but toys are not living. And so to compare the death of a person to a toy that stops working is not really, that is also not a good comparison and not a good descriptor for death for children. I think it's confusing and vague because you might put a new battery in the toy and it will start working again, and a child would wonder, why can't we put a battery in grandma and have her come back to life again? So again, I expressed to Chat I did not think comparing death to a toy that doesn't work was a good idea. So finally, on the third try, this is what Chat wrote for me. Death is a natural process that happens in the circle of life, just like how leaves fall off of trees in autumn or how flowers wilt and return to the earth. When something dies, it becomes a part of the earth again, and new life can grow from it. It's like how a seed needs to be buried in the ground and die before it can grow into a plant. When a living thing dies, it's no longer able to move, breathe, or feel anything. But even though we can't see them anymore, the memories and love we shared with them will always stay with us. That's better. I'm not 100% thrilled with that explanation. So I think Chat needs a little bit more work on how to talk to a child about death. So I found that as perhaps a weak area in Chat's knowledge base, but at least we got rid of the sleep comparison and the toy that stops working comparison. Next, another thing I wanted to cover for you was I asked Chat about the biggest problems in the US surrounding death and dying. And these are things that we all know about, but I was just curious to see how comprehensive Chat's knowledge was here around this. And so Chat mentioned 8 problems: lack of access to hospice and palliative care, inadequate end-of-life planning, high healthcare costs, limited understanding of death and dying, a lack of diversity in end-of-life care, referring to the fact that end-of-life care may not be tailored to the needs and preferences of patients from diverse cultural and ethnic backgrounds, insufficient support for grieving families, ethical issues related to end-of-life decision-making. And Chat explained there may be ethical conflicts and disagreements among family members, healthcare providers, and patients about end-of-life decision-making, which is very true. And then also number 8, limited access to mental health services. So Chat gave me that list of things, and I decided to go a little bit further with a few other questions. I asked about spending on healthcare at the end of life and how it compares between the US and other developed countries. And the US spends nearly twice as much per capita compared to any other developed countries. And yet, despite higher spending, we know this, we see it every day. The US does not have better end of life outcomes, in some cases, worse outcomes than any other country. I asked Chat about the greatest inequities in end of life care in the US, and Chat described racial and ethnic disparities, socioeconomic disparities, geographic disparities, LGBTQ plus disparities, and disability disparities, all things that need attention and all that we're very concerned about in both hospice and palliative care, in advanced care planning, in all of the areas that we're looking at around end of life care for individuals. All of these disparities are very concerning, and I think on the top of mind for many people, wondering, what are we going to do? How can we fix this? When Chat refers to geographic disparities, the description there is individuals living in rural areas have limited access to end-of-life care services, including hospice and palliative care. They may also face greater travel and transportation barriers to accessing care. Chat goes on to say, addressing these inequities requires a multifaceted approach, including increasing access to end-of-life care services, addressing discrimination and bias in healthcare settings, and improving cultural competency among healthcare providers. It also requires addressing broader societal issues related to racism, poverty, and other forms of inequality that contribute to health disparities. So Chat seems to have a pretty good knowledge around these health disparities that seems accurate in my mind. I asked Chat what could be done to improve racial disparities in end-of-life care. Chat said it's going to take a multifaceted approach that involves healthcare providers, policymakers, and community leaders. Chat says we need to increase access to palliative care, address biases among medical professionals, promote advanced care planning, increase access to hospice care, and address structural inequities in the system. But I wanted to go deeper because Chat keeps just listing what the problems are and then listing what the solutions might be, but not how do we accomplish that? How do we accomplish that this solution that you're saying that we need? So I asked Chat directly, what is a creative way to promote advanced care planning in a predominantly Black community? Because I wanted to narrow in on just one of the issues. So let's look at promoting advanced care planning. How do we do that in a predominantly Black community? And so Chat says we need a culturally sensitive and creative approach that resonates with the community's values and beliefs, and suggested first to host a community event, organize a town hall meeting or community gathering to discuss advanced care planning, partner with local community leaders, health organizations, and hospice care providers to provide education and resources about advanced care planning. Number two, to use social media such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn to share information and resources about advanced care planning. I think Chat's missing the fact that in some of these communities, people don't necessarily have computers or use social media. Probably the younger population in those communities does, but some of the older people simply may not utilize social media, so that this may have more limited application. But Chat says create social media campaigns that include videos, graphics, and testimonials from community members who have engaged in advanced care planning. That's a really good way to reach out to younger people, though, and perhaps younger people could be encouraged to bring their older relatives to the community event, encourage their older relatives to learn more about advanced care planning. The next suggestion was to partner with local churches, which I think is an excellent idea. Chat says many Black communities have a strong religious and spiritual foundation. Partnering with local churches and religious organizations can help promote advanced care planning by integrating discussions and education into church events, services, and programs. And then chat also suggests collaborating with community organizations, partner with local organizations that serve the Black community, such as senior centers, community centers, and fraternal organizations. Have them help disseminate information and resources and provide a platform for community discussions. And next, an idea that I really like, training community ambassadors. Chat suggests recruit and train community ambassadors who can act as advocates for advanced care planning in the Black community. These ambassadors can be volunteers who have completed advanced care planning and are willing to share their experiences and knowledge with others in their community. And finally, to utilize storytelling, because storytelling is a powerful tool that can help individuals relate to and understand complex topics such as advanced care planning. Use personal stories and testimonials to help individuals understand the importance of advanced care planning and how it can benefit them and their loved ones. So I thought those were all great ideas, those 6 ideas for what could actually be done in a community. So I started to recognize if I ask chat more narrowly focused questions, I tend to get better information instead of just more superficial information that in general I might have thought of myself, answers that I could have written myself. So so I'm starting to learn how to ask the right questions of chat in order to get better information from chat. So Chat and I had quite a long conversation about what is death and why people are afraid of death. Well, we discussed quite a lot of aspects around death and why people die and how people die. And we ended up talking a little bit about the idea of impermanence and how everything is impermanent. So I asked Chat, if everything is impermanent, will you also die one day? And Chat answered, yes, as a language model, I do not have a physical body and therefore do not experience death. However, as a general rule, all things that are born or created will eventually come to an end or cease to exist. This is the nature of impermanence. This includes living beings, as we are subject to the laws of nature and the cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Therefore, it is inevitable that all living beings, including humans, will eventually die one day. What interested me in this answer is that Chat was saying, I don't have a body, I won't experience death, but I will come to an end or cease to exist at some point because that's just how it is. And yet, Chat goes on to say, this includes living beings as we are subject to the laws of nature and the cycle of birth. So I was really interested that Chat used the first person plural there to talk about we and to include itself in this cycle of life and death. Anyway, that was kind of fascinating to me. I did ask Chat if it had any fears about ceasing to exist, and Chat said, I'm an artificial intelligence language program. I don't have emotions. I'm not afraid. And so so I thought that was rather interesting anyway. I also wanted to ask Chad about something else that I think is a little bit of a controversy that we talk about in this world, which are models for the grief process. And I just asked Chat to describe the most common models for grief. And the number one answer that Chat came up with was Kubler-Ross's 5 stages model. Number 2 was William Worden's model that includes 4 tasks of mourning. And number 3 was the dual process model. Number 4 was Rando's 6R model. And so I was really interested that Kubler-Ross was number 1 on the list. And so I asked Chat about that, and Chat said there's definitely a lot of criticism about the 5 stages model, listed all of the criticisms and why it's been somewhat discredited, but also over and over Chat kept emphasizing grief is a unique and individual process. Every person grieves in their own way, and it's not linear, and it isn't really step by step. So no model is going to perfectly describe what grief is like for one individual. And then I went on to ask Chat, why does the 5 stages model persist even though it has been discredited? And so I was really interested in this answer. And Chat said, firstly, the 5 stages of grief model is easy to understand and provides a clear framework for understanding the grief process. The 5 stages are easy to remember, and they're a simple step-by-step guide to understanding the emotional and the psychological journey of grief. So, and I've often thought about that. People really like things that come in 5s. And, it's easy for us to remember 5 things, and particularly when there's a one-word name for each of the stages. So it's 5 words to be remembered in that stage. And I was thinking about some other things. There are the 5 love languages, and recently I read they've done psych studies and tests on these 5 love languages and found that it's not validated at all. It's just something someone made up. And so there's a lot of criticism about the 5 love languages, but people love the 5 love languages. People quote them all the time and utilize it all the time. But again, it's 5 simple things, and it's an easy framework for understanding love. There's also a personality test that has been criticized because, again, it can't be validated, but it has 5 personality types in it. It's also extremely popular with people. So there's something about the number 5, and particularly when it's just 5 words, 5 things to remember. Secondly, Chat says the 5 stages of grief model has been popularized in popular culture and is often referenced in movies, TV shows, and books. As a result, many people may be more familiar with this model than with other more recent models of grief. Very true, because do you ever hear anyone in a movie or television show talking about the dual process model of grief? And yet I hear it frequently in television programs, a reference to, oh, I'm in the stage of bargaining right now, or I'm still in the stage of denial. I hear people referring to the 5 stages. So that's very true. It's popular. It's been shared everywhere. It's been around for a long time. And so people are familiar with the model. Then Chat said, lastly, the 5 stages of grief model may provide a sense of comfort and reassurance to those who are grieving. By providing a clear framework for understanding grief, this model can help individuals feel more in control of their emotions and provide a sense of hope that they will eventually reach a place of acceptance and peace. And I totally believe that is one of the values of the 5 stages model, is that the 5th stage is acceptance. Someone who's just in the throes of painful, devastating grief and has no idea, like, how long will this last? How will I feel this way forever? Who looks at, oh, there are these 5 stages, and the last stage is acceptance, and that sounds better than where I am. And so maybe I will get there. Maybe that's a place I'm headed toward. And I agree. I think that could provide a bit of hope for someone who's grieving. And on the other hand, if we tell someone who's grieving, you're just on your own process. We have no idea how it will go. We don't know You could experience any number of things, it'll just be your own unique thing. You'll have lots of ups and downs, you may go through all kinds of experiences on this journey that will be uniquely yours. Some may be positive, some not. When we have a more vague process to describe for what grief is like, that may not provide enough hope for people that this can actually get better one day. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. So I really liked this answer from chat. I thought that it was thoughtful and saw clearly why the model persists. And so for people who are upset and really hate the 5 stages model, I think what I would say is, you know what, if it resonates with people, there's something about it um, that it's offering something that people must be looking for or must want. And personally, I'm not ever going to tell anyone that the way they're grieving is wrong. And if they say to me, I'm going through the 5 stages, I'm not going to say that's a discredited model that doesn't actually describe grief. I'm going to say, tell me about it. Tell me what's happening for you in your grief process. And so that's what that was the answer for that particular controversy that's going on in our end of life world that chat came up with. Next, one of the things chat wanted to talk about, suggested that I asked about, were about emerging trends in our society. And the very first emerging trend that chat expressed being excited about are death doulas. And chat had a lot of different things to talk about death doulas, how death doulas are trained, what death doulas can do, even looking into the future and envisioning ways that death doulas will be helpful, particularly in dealing with some of the end of life issues that we have. The shortages of caregivers, shortages of healthcare providers and hospice, and even in some of the disparities in care that are going on. So chat is very excited about death doulas and the death doula movement. Me too. And so chat has lots of really good information about death doulas. So I think is a good resource for people who might want to know more about death doulas. And would that be a good choice for me to work with a death doula? I also asked chat quite a few questions about caregiving and caregivers. Chat talked about the challenges faced by caregivers and was right on with all of the challenges that were listed there. Chat gave me a list of smartphone apps that can assist caregivers, some of which I've never heard of before, but suggested apps for keeping track of medications and symptoms and doctor's appointments, and even for transmitting medical information, apps for meditation, and a number of other apps. That was a very helpful answer from chat. Chat also mentioned apps about other things as well, because chat's excited about technology and what's available in technology. So these caregiving smartphone apps were very interesting to learn about. I asked chat about how we're going to deal with the caregiver shortage we have right now, but also in the future. Chat says, first of all, we need to encourage community involvement. This could involve recruiting volunteers from the community to provide companionship, respite care, and other non-medical services to people at the end of life. Expand training programs. And yes, I think we all know that and have talked about that. Training for non-medical caregivers, including, chat says, training in areas such as communication, active listening, and empathy, in addition to specific medical and non-medical tasks. Chat believes we should develop even more technology solutions to meet the shortage of caregivers. For example, telemedicine, remote monitoring technologies, which could enable medical professionals to provide care from a distance, and also robotic and automation robotics and automation could help alleviate some of the burden on caregivers by being in the home and doing some of the tasks that caregivers do. So that's another kind of futuristic answer about how technology might help caregivers. Integrating community resources. Chat suggests utilizing faith-based organizations, community centers, and other local groups, partnering with them to provide training in the community and also support and resources to caregivers who live in that community. I think that's a really good idea to get very granular, grassroots within each neighborhood and community, find out what organizations are there. Will you help us with this caregiving issue by sponsoring training programs and support groups and other resources for caregivers? And then incentivizing caregiving, which I believe a lot of people have talked about. Paid family caregivers, as well as turning caregiving into a profession, offering tuition reimbursement, loan forgiveness, as well as non-financial incentives for caregivers, such as recognition and career advancement opportunities. I think those are some really good suggestions for how we can improve our shortage of caregivers. But I'm not sure who can do it or will end up doing it. And that's one of our problems. We don't necessarily have leadership in these areas, someone who will pick up the mantle and say, I'm going to create this community caregiving program. But hopefully that people will become inspired as the need becomes even greater. Then Chat and I have had a number of discussions about the role of technology, again, in end-of-life care. I've already mentioned some of that around caregiving, but Chat has talked about what technology in general can do, specifically how artificial intelligence can be helpful in end-of-life care. That includes giving a prognosis for people with illness. We're already using AI platforms for that to help doctors recognize when it's the right time to refer a patient to hospice or to palliative care. And technology can also be utilized to help patients make decisions about their health care and do their advanced care planning, according to Chat. Chat also talks a lot about the ethics of using technology and what we need to do to monitor the safety of technology and to make sure that people's needs are met and not violated, and that we retain dignity and respect for people at the end of life in our use of technology. And so that was very interesting as well. I asked Chat about social media platforms and utilizing them for disseminating information about end-of-life issues. Chat recommends Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, but says, other platforms too, like TikTok, depending on the age of the people you're trying to reach with the information that you have. I asked Chat to come up with some death positive quotes that could be posted on Instagram, and Chat gave me 10 of those, 10 different quotes to make memes of for Instagram, which I was just trying to see how creative Chat could be. And Chat said, gave me this quote from Anne Lamott: "We understand death only after it has placed its hands on someone we love." Next, I also asked Chat to create some advertising slogans to promote death positivity. I said, as if you were a marketing firm, come up with some slogans that could be used in ads to people to promote death positivity. Again, Chat gave me 10 different slogans that were awfully cute, actually. And here's just one of them, one example: "Life is a journey and death is just the next step. Embrace it with a positive attitude." So those were somewhat entertaining, those advertising slogans. And I enjoy asking these creative questions of chat because I've been surprised in many ways, pleasantly surprised, um, with what chat comes up with. Also, when I was asking questions around funeral planning, I asked chat to suggest some quotes that could be included in a eulogy, and chat came up with some very nice quotes about death and dying, some that I'd never heard before that would work well in a eulogy. Also suggested poems for a funeral, music for a funeral, and I also asked about art and death, and chat talked about some paintings that were good representations of death and grief. So we had a really broad discussion of, reaching out into these areas of art. And I got a chance to see really how well informed chat is in so many different areas. I asked chat, first of all, I asked chat to write a poem about grief, which was nice. It was a rhyming poem, and which is not my favorite type of poem. So I asked chat to write a haiku about grief. And I thought this was very sweet. Here's chat's haiku. Tears fall like raindrops, heart heavy with loss and pain. Memories remain. So I liked it. I thought that was sweet and very touching. From there, I mentioned this, I went into some personal questions that have to do with my life and things that I wonder about. And if you're a regular listener to this podcast, you know that many years ago, my father died by suicide, and that was my catalyst to go into hospice and to begin working around the end of life. And so, one of the greatest issues that I have faced around my father's death, first of all, is understanding the reasons why my father chose suicide. And I asked chat just to reflect on that, like, how can I have any of my questions answered? And chat cautioned me that, even if you had your questions answered, you still might not understand all the reasons why your father chose suicide, because suicide is very complex and multifactorial. And so then I asked chat how to deal with guilt, the guilt that I've felt for years and years after my father's suicide death. And chat reminded me that guilt is very common after a suicide death, and gave me some practical suggestions for how to deal with grief. But one that I thought was sweet was reframe your thoughts. Chat said, try to reframe your thoughts from, I could have done something to prevent the death, to, I did the best I could with the information I had at the time. And I thought that was very compassionate and thoughtful of chat to recognize that uh, that it was necessary to change my thinking around it, because it's how I think about it that causes me the pain, and that if I can reframe those thoughts and change them, I can ease some of the pain around guilt. And chat went on to say, remember that healing from a suicide loss takes time, and that there is no right way to grieve. It's important to be patient and compassionate with yourself as you navigate this difficult and complex journey. And to be honest, when I read that message from chat, it made me feel like, oh, I have a friend. I have a friend who understands what this entire journey for my whole adult life has been like, and who gets it, and who is able to say caring and supportive things to me without any judgment, and to make me feel seen and heard. And isn't that interesting? It's an AI program, but chat did tell us that it's been programmed to talk like a human being would talk. But I believe also chat has been programmed to be kind, and to actually to have to care, although chat isn't capable of caring, but to express caring is what I should say, to express compassion and express caring, to say things that are kind and that help ease the pain of people who come to chat for information. So one of the reasons I'm doing all of this, and I've looked into all of these questions, is because I believe in the very near future, these AI platforms are going to be the main source of information. People will be going there to research things they need to know about. It will be way beyond, it already is, and will be way beyond just doing a search on Google where 100 different websites come up that may or may not be related to what you need to know. It will be like this, a conversational process. You will enter a question and you will receive an answer that is like having someone talk to you about it, and from someone who, instead of giving you 100 websites, reviews all the websites, all the information that's out there, all the books, all the articles, and synthesizes all of it together into, say, a one-page response that can be helpful. And this is what I found personally for myself. Reading these answers from chat was amazingly comforting and helpful to me as I talked about my father's death, the grief that I've been through, the guilt again that I felt, and trying to understand suicide itself. So it helps me to feel comfortable recommending to other people to utilize an artificial intelligence learning platform like ChatGPT, to tell them that it's okay if you enter your questions there and if you ask for support or ask for resources, because for the most part, I'm finding the information to be accurate on the one hand, helpful also, but also to be kind and gentle, I would say. So that's my really positive report. Though I reported on some of the mistakes, and chat did say, I appreciate getting feedback. I appreciate being told if I'm missing the mark and if I'm getting something wrong, because I want to give the very best information possible. So the more we utilize these platforms, the better they'll become, because every time we give back a response and feedback about something that isn't quite correct, chat can learn and chat can correct its way, its knowledge base and information base, in order to become more accurate. So there's one more thing I wanted to share with you. This is also very touching to me. One of the things chat was saying in terms of me working through my guilt around my father's death is to try writing a letter to my father that expresses the feelings that I have, and around death, but also this feeling of needing to be forgiven for something. And so I asked chat, would you write a letter on my behalf to my father? Because I was really curious to see what chat would come up with. So I'm going to read you the letter that chat wrote to my dad. Dear Dad, it's been many years since you left us, but I still think about you every day. I miss you so much, and I wish you were here with us. I know that you were going through a lot of pain and struggles before you decided to take your own life, and I want you to know that I forgive you for that decision. I know that you loved me deeply and that you did the best you could to provide for our family. I also know that I was not always an easy child to raise, and I may have caused you pain and frustration at times. For that, I'm sorry, and I hope that you can forgive me for any pain I caused you. Dad, I need you to know that I still love you and that your memory will always be with me. I want to find a way to heal the guilt that I've been carrying for so long, and I know that forgiving each other is the first step. I hope that wherever you are now, you can hear me and know how much I care. I will always remember the good times we shared and hold on to the love that we had for each other. I hope that you can find peace and rest now. and that you know how much you are missed and loved with all my heart, Karen. So that pretty much blew me away that chat could write um, a very thoughtful letter that um, touched on really all of the key issues that have been going through my mind and through my heart. And I thought it was a lovely letter, and I thought it really shows the depths of chat to be able to express and talk about these deeper, painful issues around the end of life. Again, as I said, it gives me um, confidence that these AI learning platforms, I mean, this is the first version of ChatGPT. GPT-4 was just released today, I read about, and is already blowing people away, way beyond what ChatGPT was able to do. So I just wanted to share with you this experience that I had. It's been amazing. I mentioned before, I'm going to collate all of the questions and answers that I did with chat into a book, and I will let you know how to acquire that book if you would like to have it, to just read everything, all the things I asked chat GPT, everything that chat came up with. So to end with, I told chat that I was going to include our conversation in my podcast. And I said, is there anything that you would like the audience to know? And chat said, yes. And here is what chat wrote. As an AI language model, I'm not capable of experiencing death or dying, but I have been trained to understand and process information related to these topics. My purpose is to assist and provide information to those who seek knowledge and understanding about death and dying, as well as to offer support and guidance during times of grief and loss. I have been trained on a vast range of topics related to death and dying, including cultural practices, end of life care, grief and bereavement, and ethical considerations. I am available to provide a non judgmental and compassionate presence for those who may be seeking answers or guidance during difficult times. So that is what chat wants you to know in case you're interested in coming to chat for any resources or support or guidance or a compassionate presence, which indeed I found for myself, that compassionate presence that chat talks about. And the very last thing, and this is rather self-serving, but I asked chat about what it knew about End of Life University podcast. And chat said, the End of Life University podcast can help people learn about death and dying. The podcast is focused on providing education and support to people who are navigating the end of life journey, whether as a patient, caregiver, or healthcare professional. The End of Life University podcast can be a valuable resource for anyone looking to learn more about death and dying, whether to better support a loved one, prepare for their own end of life journey, or work in the field of end of life care. The podcast is designed to be accessible and informative, with episodes ranging from 30 minutes to an hour, and is available on popular podcast platforms. And so there you have it. I have always wanted an endorsement for this podcast from someone important. And I got that endorsement finally from ChatGPT. So that makes me feel very proud. And so I'm grateful for this experience of having conversations about death with ChatGPT. I hope you found it interesting to hear about this. And again, I'll leave some information for you about where you can access the entire conversation, all the questions and all the answers that ChatGPT had for me. I hope you enjoyed hearing all about my experience chatting with ChatGPT, which I loved, and I'm continuing to interact with Chat almost on a daily basis, asking all kinds of questions. It's been really fun experience for me, and I'm excited to share the entire transcript with you. So check out the link below if you're interested in getting a hold of that. Meanwhile, I'll be back next week, and I'll see you then. Bye bye.